Welcome back. I'm about ready to head up this path we've found and see if it leads us to New Hope Cemetery. I've never been much of a cemetery scavenger, but I love history, especially family history. And I've learned that cemeteries can help us uncover what time has covered up. New Hope Cemetery is probably the only remaining physical evidence of the existence of Abijah Sparks and his family living here. Well, I think we've found it. I don't see any no trespassing signs, and there's headstones all over. The gate is chained, but it's not locked. So we'll just let ourselves in. Garrett Medlin said that there's a group of local people that come twice a year to keep this area cleared. And again, there's reason to be thankful for the drought for keeping down the weeds. I see a name here that's familiar. It says James P. Rose. Died October 20th, 1886. He was Abijah Sparks' son-in-law. He married Abijah's daughter Edith, known as Eddie, in Tennessee before they moved to Missouri. Eddie died about 6 years earlier, but I see no evidence of a stone marking her grave. According to the 1870 census, they were living here with their two youngest daughters. James listed his occupation as farmer. By the 1880 census, he was living in Breton, or Potosi, with his youngest daughter Eveline and her husband Valentin Halsey. And he showed himself as a widower and his occupation as a Baptist minister. Perhaps his congregation funded this nice headstone. But let's see what else we can find. I see my name. Oh, this is a rush for me. It says Mary, wife of S.A. Sparks, died May 1st, 1871. She was James and Edie's fourth child, a granddaughter of Abijah Sparks. That makes her a first cousin of mine 3 times removed. In 1867, she married Stephen Alexander Sparks, also a grandchild of Abijah Sparks. So they were first cousins. Mary was not yet 25 years old when she died, giving birth to their second son, William. The stone design is laid out as was typical in the 1860s and 1870s. The deceased wife's first name, followed by her husband's full name, followed by the date of death, and then the years, months, and days of life. All around her marker are other stones, many other stones. They're unmarked, broken, but they clearly mark graves. A similar situation occurs in other parts of the cemetery where there's a marked grave and then surrounded by older looking stones that are unmarked. That indicates to me that some of these older stones that are unmarked could be other family members. One could even be the stone that marks Abijah's resting place. This is a good example about 20 yards away. These stones mark the graves of the Halsey family. This is the grave of Elizabeth Halsey, the wife of William Halsey. William Halsey committed suicide on her grave 4 years after her death. These stones are modern stones placed on the foundations of the original stones. Just to the left of the Halsey plot and up a rise, you can see a flat spot where the New Hope Baptist Church once stood. This is an old photo from the 1940s or 1950s of the New Hope Baptist Church. And this would be a view of the cemetery looking back from the church. Well, I'm extremely satisfied. I did what I came to do. I'm sure members of my family have walked right where I have walked. They've paid their respects as I have paid mine. I've done everything that can possibly be done to put myself where Abijah lived here in Missouri and where he probably died. Someday I may be lucky enough to find my way back to Tennessee and North Carolina and South Carolina where he came from. I think I could probably put my feet pretty close to where he was there as well. I know it may seem strange, but this gives me a much better sense of his life. So mission accomplished. I'm pretty elated right now. Oh, as we leave here, I should tell you the story about William Halsey. This story was written in a Halsey Bible. It reads, William was a farmer and quite well off. He owned 640 acres of land and had many slaves. When the war ended, he freed his slaves and gave them 40 acres of land near Sullivan, Missouri. He took his own life 4 years after his wife's death. He was sick and lonely. He went to his granddaughter's spring house, got a glass of milk and a cucumber, and put the poison on the cucumber, rode his old horse Bill to the cemetery, and tied him to a tree at the bottom of the hill. He climbed the hill to the cemetery, ate the cucumber, and drank the milk, and died on his wife's grave. He left a note telling them where his horse was, and he would be with Betty tonight. He was laid out at the New Hope Baptist Church and buried in the New Hope Cemetery near Indian Creek, Washington County, Missouri. So right there where Honey is where they would have found his horse, Old Bill. Before starting back, I think I'll rest a bit and take all this in. None of these people left much of a written record about what their life in Missouri was like in those days. Rachel Sparks, who married John Simmons and they lived at the end of these fields where we first came in, died at the age of 36, giving birth to twins. They were their 14th and 15th children. John Simmons remarried Miss Sarah Anderson and had 5 more children. Although harsh, they seemed to thrive on the abundance of the land. At the age of 83, Sarah wrote a letter to the Sullivan News dated June 29, 1914. She writes, "The houses we lived in were made of logs. They were one story with pungent floors. Doors were made of clapboard, hung with wooden hinges. On still mornings, one could hear them squeaking quite a distance. The windows consisted of a hole in the wall with shutters made of boards. Sometimes they were hung on wooden hinges. Often they used buckskin for their hinges. The dance of those days was the reel. The men stood facing the women and they danced between each other. Then they swung those on the other side. Children from 8 to 14 years old in the summer danced barefoot on the pungent floors. Buckskin breeches were common. Dried venison and honey were abundant. It seems to me that people were happier then in those days than they are now. I often compare the life of today with the life of those days. In my young days, when neighbors visited each other, they went on Saturday and stayed all night. These old people would talk over their troubles and share their sorrows and rejoice over their successes. Such a thing as a neighbor charging a neighbor for help was unheard of. When we moved to this farm, there was no Sullivan Town. The Frisco Railroad hadn't been built yet. Many of the landmarks of those early days are gone, and the people are almost all dead. That's true, Sarah, but we still do remember them. Well, so you're probably thinking this adventure is over, but then you would be wrong. Well, it looks like we're going to need a part 5 for this adventure.